We are only a few games in to the new NHL season, and there are some very, very intriguing fantasy storylines that we need to keep an eye on because we're trying to stack this paper, people. Thank you for being here. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hockey heads, fantasy fanatics, and degenerate gamblers, welcome back to your show, and welcome back inside the fantasy hockey lab that is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast Show. Another solo episode with just your boy Big Flip Livingstone. I promise you my co-host Steele will be back for tomorrow's episode. He's getting his setup primed and ready to go because we are now in full swing, people. And thank you for making us your first listen every single day. I hope that hopping on here Monday to Friday does give you a little bit of that fantasy edge, a couple of extra bucks in your pocket, hopefully with these bets. I got some more big-time bets coming up later in today's episode. 1-2 last night, 1 win, 2 losses for the bets on Monday night. Need to do better. We will do better on today's episode. I promise you that. And also, 3 or 4 games in the book here for every single team now. We can start to see some of these trends developing. And there are some really intriguing ones from a fantasy standpoint that I have down today that I think we need to be keeping our eye on for more than just overall standings and success of your team, but more importantly, the success of your fantasy team. Because some of these things, for example, the Rangers' ability to pummel other teams on the power play right now, these can mean big time things for some peripheral pieces on the Rangers, on the other teams. So I'm taking a look at 5 fantasy trends to watch today. And I teased one already. These Rangers are for real. I'm going to talk about another Metro team being for real later in the episode with the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm going to talk about Alex Ovechkin later in the episode. And the Minnesota Wild again, because things are not looking good in Minnesota early. But I do want to start today's episode by talking about the New York Rangers, a team that a lot of people in the offseason expected to be even better this season. Look, when you have the Jacob Trubas, Adam Foxes, Igor Shesterkins of the world on that back end, Keandre Miller, another really good young D-man who I really, really like, that just props up the forward group and the offensive ability to do what they do. Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad are already going off. Panarin is leading the league with 10 points. Right there behind him, Mika Zibanejad with 8. And what I wanted to talk about trends and fantasy-wise, because this could be huge if they are able to continue to put up points and score on the power play. You need to get yourself a hold of a bunch of these Rangers pieces because a balanced attack is what I'm going to talk about for an LA Kings team in a few minutes. This is a pretty good balanced attack as well. And I just needed to show some love here because the addition of Vincent Trocheck has come in seamlessly so far. Capo Caco is looking good, getting some nice minutes on that top line alongside Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. Artemi Panarin, we know. Alexis Lafreniere is still in the mix. Philip Hedl in the mix. I mentioned the blue liners, and it's all topped off by Shesterkin. But so far, they just hung a 6 spot on the Ducks on Monday night. 6 goals, 3 of which coming on the power play. 5 of their, let me check how many goals. They're leading the league, by the way, in goals scored at 17. And 6 of those have come on the power play already. We saw special teams actually let them down a little bit against the Carolina Hurricanes last season. I think that this New York Rangers team is going to be one to absolutely put some Stanley Cup money on. They smell and look like a Stanley Cup threat, and that power play is a big reason why. And if it can continue to click, I mentioned some of those, you're not going to be able to get yourself the Chris Kreiders, Artemi Panarins, and Vincent Trochecks of the world unless you're swinging for the fences and doing some kind of deal, which might be interesting. We can maybe take a look at some of those angles later in the week, trade options. We'll see. but you might be able to get your hands on some of those other guys that I mentioned. Alexis Lafreniere, Capo Caco, maybe even Philip Hedl. I know the Hedls of the world aren't producing as much as that top side, but the point to be made here, one of the fantasy trends that I see is this elite power play and the ability of the New York Rangers to score at will. Like I said, 6 goals on Monday night against the Anaheim Ducks. I know it's the Anaheim Ducks, but the point to be made here is they are going to continue to score goals, leading the league with 17 already through 4. Keep your eye on this New York Rangers team. Now, number 2 on my top 5 fantasy trends to watch right now, early season predictions, early season reactions. That's what it is on today's episode, people. Like I said, I'm going to talk about the Hurricanes. I'm going to talk about Alex Ovechkin, but I want to talk about, don't forget about big time bets. I'm going to get to that too. But I want to talk about this LA Kings club because right after the New York Rangers with 16 goals behind the Rangers at 17, are these LA Kings for the top scoring team in the league so far? I understand they've also allowed quite a few goals. They're right there at the top for goals against. But this is fantasy, people, and I'm trying to highlight some of these options early in the year that can make you some bank down the stretch in this fantasy season because there's no playing around. I mentioned it on yesterday's episode. Sometimes you're going to have to get lucky with these start of the season pickups and drop offs because they will be key down the stretch. Adrian Kempe, Ans Kopitar, Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, Kevin Fiala, Trevor Moore, Philip Deneau, all the way down to a guy in Arthur Kaliev and Sean Durzi. All of these guys are fantasy relevant. Obviously, down the list, it has to be deeper formats. By the way, go out there and get you some Sean Durzi if you can in some deeper formats. I'm loving that. But the point I want to make and the trend I'm seeing with this LA Kings team is a balanced attack. They brought in Kevin Fiala in the offseason. That might be the most underrated offseason addition on the market because now you take a look at the top 3 lines in LA. The top line of Kevin Fiala, Kopitar, and Kempe is nasty. Second line, it was one of the best all season long last year, showing that they had chemistry and showing that Trevor Moore, Philip Deneau, and Victor Arvidsson are a good second option, one of the better and more consistent ones last year. And now all of a sudden, you have Quentin Byfield, a top 5 pick, Gabriel Vilardi, a top 15 pick, and Alex Iafallo, who's been proven to be one of those sneaky under the radar guys. You know, I'm a little bit high on Iafallo because I just picked him up on the waiver wire. Thank you for tuning into those episodes. But seriously, this balanced attack from the LA Kings, I know the back end, other than Doughty and Durzi, a couple of young pieces there. Props due to Rob Blake, though, for building this offensive unit that they have because John Quick and Cal Peterson are a solid duo, and I expect this Kings team to be in the mix once again for the top 3 spots in that Pacific Division. I know the Calgary Flames are nasty. I understand the Edmonton Oilers are also nasty, but I don't know what it is about this Kings team. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. And I just think the balanced attack that I've seen, another trend to watch, you got to keep your eye on some of these peripheral pieces on the LA Kings. Gabe Vilardi, 3 goals, 2 assists already in 4 games. Iafallo, 2 goals, 3 assists in 4 games. Fiala, 1 goal, 4 assists. Trevor Moore, 3 assists. I'm going to stop reaming off the stats because all that matters is the balanced attack that the LA Kings are bringing right now make them fantasy relevant. They also make them a team that I'm going to be betting on quite a bit over these next few weeks just because I like what's going on top to bottom. Again, we are 4 games into the season, people, but I'm all kinds of fired up. And I got some more picks coming later in this episode, including my lock of the night. It didn't hit last night. Thanks a lot for that, Austin Matthews, but that's okay. Sidney Crosby actually was my mistake. It was Sidney Crosby. Matthews burned me the other day. I'll hold it together, people. Let me very quickly tell you about one of my favorite delicious and nutritious snacks that we love here on our show. You know it's Built Bars, baby. And if you haven't tried one of life's indulgent treats, that is the Built Bar Puff, you are neglecting yourself. They are covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, Built has done it again. It's all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, but they bring a whopping 15 grams of protein in them, making them delicious and nutritious for before or after the gym. What's great about Built is they all come with that collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides you tons of health benefits. It's tasty, it's nutritious. I don't know what else you need to hear other than you're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether it's a snack or a late night treat, this is something you want in your cupboard. Grab yourself a Built bar and thank me later. Go to built.com, use the promo code locked on 15 and get 15% off your order. Again, that is promo code locked on 15. Now, people, we need to get right back into this and get serious because some of these trends, yes, it might fizzle out. Some of these trends might hold true for a lot longer, and that means you got to have your finger on the pulse and making sure what they mean for your fantasy pieces around your team and maybe some that you need to get on your team. Speaking of which, Matt Zuccarello of the Minnesota Wild came out and said that they play defense like a junior team right now in Minnesota. And I'd like to agree with him for the most part. They have left Marc-Andre Fleury out to dry, and he's allowed 20 goals over the first 3 games. That's the most in the NHL. The Minnesota Wild as a team have allowed 20 goals in 3 games. That is so far from not good enough that there is some concerns going on for me now in Minnesota. I was just on yesterday talking about don't bail on Marc-Andre Fleury, and I still hold true to that fact because I don't think those 20 goals are all his fault. He has been left out to dry a couple of different times by this defensive group, a defensive group I was just talking up, and now, they get the doors blown off them again last night. And I just don't know what's going on in Minnesota. Small sample size again. But you have to take a look at, is it time to bail on this Wild team? I don't think we're there quite yet. Kaprizov is still getting his, but other than that, this team needs to be a whole lot better. And I mentioned the divisions, I mentioned playoff teams, I mentioned bubble teams. The Minnesota Wild are tough in that division because if the Dallas Stars continue to play that how they've played, there are going to be a team or two on the outside looking in that central division that, maybe last year, aside from Colorado, it was pretty much open near the bottom. But the point to be taken here is Kaprizov still getting his. But where else is the fantasy production coming from on this Minnesota team right now? Not many places. So buyer beware and keep your finger on the pulse, keep your finger on the waiver wire, because as much as I am invested in Marc-Andre Fleury personally on a couple of teams, I've been very clear and adamant about that. I can't let good opportunities to add some of these pieces in to support my squad while my top pieces are struggling. That can put you behind the 8 ball so heavily that there is no coming back from it. So this is another one of these fantasy trends that I had to highlight. The Minnesota Wild, keep your eye on these Minnesota Wild pieces because things might get out of control real quick if they can't figure out how to play some defense, because we know that this is one of those teams that is kind of, they need to play together as a cohesive unit because they just don't have that many stud pieces aside from Kaprizov, obviously. So this is now what happens when the defense starts breaking down, leaving your goalie out to dry. The forward group can't score at will like they want to. And I know they've still gotten some, I believe, let me see the goals scored for the Wild here. I know they were still putting up points. So 12 goals, in the 3 games scored. That should be enough for at least one win, but it's not happening. So keep your eyes on that. I don't know if it's time to bail on the Wild just yet, but it is time for me to talk about the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm going to talk about Alex Ovechkin next on the heels of his 4-point night on Monday night. And of course, to end the show, I got my big time bets and I got my lock of the night. Please stay tuned for that. And if you're out there in the podcast world and you're feeling what you're hearing, whether it's just me or Steele and I as well, let us know what you're feeling, or if you're not, drop us a review, drop us a follow, let us know so we can get better. We appreciate that. The Carolina Hurricanes. That's what's in my notes next, because as much as these Minnesota Wild have been a little bit up and down, the Carolina Hurricanes have looked very, very good through 3 games. I know, again, broken record flip, 3 games, it's early. but they deserve a look at plus 1,000 right now for the cup. And you're like, Flip, they beat the Kraken, they beat the San Jose Sharks. This team is real good. This team is real good. And if not for the New York Rangers, their odd for the Stanley Cup would be, even it would be a lot lower. Plus 1,000 right now for the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm taking a real serious look at them. And I know I said a lot about the Carolina Hurricanes at the start of the season. They were one of the teams that I sprinkled on before the puck dropped on this 2022-23 season. So I don't mean to keep bringing up some of these same topics, but I'm really intrigued to see what the Carolina Hurricanes are going to continue to do here, because right there on that cusp of Colorado Avalanche, New York Rangers, this team is right there in that conversation. And they just have so many awesome fantasy pieces. And here we go again with Seth Jarvis, but he has looked great. Martin Necas has looked great. Sebastian Aho, of course. You're even getting some production from Jacob Slavin already early in the season. Andrei Svechnikov, Paul Stastny, Jordan Stahl, and Jesper Fassler on that third line. Not doing too much yet, but this is just, again, another balanced attack from another really good Eastern Conference team. And if you can go out there and snag yourself a Necas or a Seth Jarvis, if you're in some of these leagues that don't have as many teams, those are two guys that I think are going to continue to have good offensive seasons. Some of the people who listen to this podcast are probably like, man, if this guy Flip says one more thing about Seth Jarvis, I'm going to need to get his 24 tattooed on me somewhere. But that's just how much I like this kid. And so far, so good for Jarvis. So we'll keep holding these Hurricanes down. But when I was doing my research for today's show, and I understand it was the Sharks and the Kraken that they beat them neat and tidy, both of them. This is a team at plus 1,000 for the Stanley Cup that is worth a $20 bet of your money. I will take my tip at the end of the season. At the end of this episode, I got a bet or two come in, but I want to talk about Alexander Ovechkin because, look, people, Steele and I came on this show maybe, a month, maybe 2 months ago. We did our bold predictions, and we said some things about Alex Ovechkin taking a step back this year. And I know Steele has made some really good predictions, and that one still might hold true. But for me personally, I wanted to come on today and say I was wrong because Alexander Ovechkin still has it. And I don't know why I even doubted him for 1 second, because he is just so good. I grew up watching Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin as the faces of this league. And wow, what a treat we have been in store for. I know he only had one goal through his first 3 games. Last night, he puts up a 4-point spot, 2 goals, 2 assists, I believe. Does that make sense? 1 goal, 3 assists. I'm sorry, but still a 4-point night for Alex Ovechkin. I think this is a sign of things to come. I'm showing you these 5 fantasy trends that I've had my eye on that kind of, sparked my interest. Rangers power play, Kings balanced attack. What's going on in Minnesota? The Carolina Hurricanes worth a look for the cup. And Alex Ovechkin. How have we counted out a player who has been this consistent and this good for this long? That was my bad. Steele might still stick to his prediction, and I will let him speak for himself. That's not what I'm about on this show. But for myself and my take, I need to show some love to the number 8. I know it's one night. 4-point nights don't happen very often. He literally won that game. It was a comeback against the Canucks. You want to say maybe they blew it. They've blown a few, I think 3 in a row now. They've blown multi-goal leads for the Canucks. That's another thing I'm going to talk about for my big-time bets. But the comeback by Ovechkin in the Capitals, that was something that I had to jump on here today and mention. That's a fact. Ovi is still a stud. Does he score 50? I think that's a stretch. 40, definitely in the realm of possibility. He can still put up an 80-point season. Time will tell, but we're keeping an eye on it. That's my top 5 fantasy trends so far to watch. Some of them might translate into some good things down the stretch in your fantasy league. We will get to big time bets in a second. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We see and appreciate you. If you want, smash that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. And while you're at it, why don't you go out there and make your second listen more fire locked on content because we got the NHL covered. It's game to game NHL. Make it your second listen every day, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked on game to game covers everything from the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow game to game on Locked On NHL, available across all platforms you get your favorite content, including YouTube. So make sure you go out there and you check that out as well. Party people in the place to be. Monday, I went 1-2 with my bets. 1 win, 2 losses. I had the over in that Florida-Boston game. It went over the number. Got burned bad by the Sidney Crosby angle. I was hoping that they show up. Props due to the Montreal Canadiens, who, they just really love burning my pocketbook, but that's okay. This is a learning process, people, and we will continue to grind. Speaking of grind, I mentioned the Canucks blowing multiple 2 or 3 goal leads over the last week or so. They have a players only meeting right after the game. It's one of the top headlines out there. What does it mean for tonight? I think they respond. I think they respond in a big way. They roll into Columbus. Both teams not playing well. 0-3. The Columbus Blue Jackets are struggling to score goals. The Canucks are not. They are scoring goals, but they're blowing leads left and right. That's okay with me. They also won their last meeting between these two teams. I know that doesn't always mean a lot, but I'm feeling it for Tuesday night's bets. My first pick, Canucks on the money line, -105. Again, these go out early. The odds will fluctuate by the time you make your bets, but that's okay because I think these Canucks bounce back. They're going to be on the cusp for a wild card spot. Blowing multiple goal leads to start the season is not a good way to start. What does this players only meeting really mean? What are the results of teams after having them? Usually I want to say teams respond. That's the angle I'm taking. Obviously, that is not an easy one that we can look into for stats, but I'm going to say that the Canucks respond on the money line, on the road against the Columbus Blue Jackets team, missing Patrick Laine and struggling to score. I can pull it up very quickly. I think the Blue Jackets have only popped 5 goals in their first 3 games. That's not going to get it done, and I don't see that stopping tonight, but if it does, I still like my odds at -105 for a Canucks team to bounce back. Now, that is not my lock of the night. I will save it for right after my second pick. My second pick, I'm going to the Ottawa Senators on the money line at home. I understand the Bruins have a really good track record against the Ottawa Senators over the past 10 games, so much so as to a tune of an 8-2 record. Flip, what are you doing going against a team who only has or going with a team that only has 2 wins in their last 10 against the Boston Bruins? This is a good spot for an Ottawa Senators team that needs a win. Straight up and down, they need a win. And after everything that went down in the offseason and everything we've liked from the Ottawa Senators, 2 games, 3 goals, I think they wake up. I think they wake up in a big way. Linus Ullmark was in the cage for Boston last night against the Florida Panthers, so you're likely getting Jeremy Swayman. I don't know what that means overall because it is so early in the season. I don't know who I actually like more, to be honest, because I do like me some Linus Ullmark action. That's another story for another episode. But I'm just feeling this home spot for the Senators, who are an improved team. And just because they lost the first 2 games, let's not put the book out on them, not even close yet, because I like everything that's going on in Ottawa. The Cam Talbot thing is obviously a bad hand to be dealt, but maybe Anton Forsberg's the better goalie anyway. Again, conversations for another day. My second pick of the night, Ottawa Senators on the money line, -120. I'm getting pretty good numbers for both of these teams. Slight favorites, both of them on the money line, but I'm okay with that, especially my Senators pick. I'm feeling that one. But you know what? I'm feeling my Canucks pick too, because that Senators matchup between the Bruins, as much as the Bruins have dominated, the Sens played really well in their last game last March, and they won that most recent meeting. Maybe not March, me with the dates. My lock of the night. And thank you for riding with me, people, on another solo episode. I hope you've appreciated the listen. Just with me flapping my gums for 20 to 30 minutes. I'm thirsty. I need a little agua, but here we go with my lock of the night. The Buffalo Sabres roll into Edmonton And this game just has all the makings of an over. Lately, I've been pretty good with my over-unders. That's what's been hitting for me. So I'm going back to the well with an over pick here at some pretty good odds. It's sitting at 6.5 for minus 136. The last time that the Oilers hosted the Sabres, the Oilers put up a 6 spot on the Sabres and the total went over the number. I know the recent matchups and recent meetings don't always hold a ton of weight, but for tonight's games, I'm really feeling it. And this Sabres team, I know we've said a lot of good things about some of the young pieces. They are going to struggle to stop pucks with Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie in the net. I love the Craig Anderson swan song story. It's great. I'm not here for it. This game is going to go over. I'm probably going to sprinkle a little bit on the Oilers as well. I could see this being 5-3. I could see it being 6-2. This is going to be something crooked because I think McDavid goes off. I think the Oilers go off, and I can still see a couple of goals going in on what we've seen to be a shaky Jack Campbell so far from the Edmonton Oilers. So, yeah, I could see 5-2, 6-2. I hope I didn't just go too far down the predictions well, and now this bad boy is going to be a 3-2 final. I'm going to look bad, but that's what you do when you put your opinion on the internet every day, people. You come back the next day and you take it on the chin regardless. So I'm going to ride with the Sabres at Oilers over the total for my lock of the night. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Thank you for tuning in for Tuesday's episode. Good luck with all your bets out there. Steele and I will be back in full swing for tomorrow's episode on Wednesday. So we can't wait to see you there, and good luck.